Now, I'm just going to do a question. Are you there, Dave?
Yes, I am.
Good. I was panicking a little bit then.
You were panicking.
So, welcome. Sorry, we've had a little bit of a break. Things have got in the way of archive talks like Kirklees Light Railways Gala. Those of you contributed to St Alders restoration, if you get an opportunity to go and have a look at some of the YouTube videos of St Alder over at Kirklees Whistlestop Valley, you should be very pleased with that your contribution was there, because the loco performed brilliantly and was very well received. And now the challenge is for us to get it to do as good on its home turf. So thank you everyone who has contributed to that, and I know that the visitors there were really appreciative of it. Now you'll twig in the archive room this evening, there's only me. Don't panic, Dave is here, but because he's managed to injure himself doing things he shouldn't have been doing, and has promised to behave, but he's unable to travel down. So I'm here driving the computer, and Dave is somewhere near the Scottish border, and he's going to talk us through the talk this evening. So this evening, the talk initially was just going to be about Gilberts Cutting, but from a chance remark by myself to Dave, Dave has got a little bit carried away during his enforced sabbatical, and we are now going much more beyond Gilberts Cutting, and partly in our attempt to redress some balance with our heroes of the time. I'll just let the Glencoe Folk Museum in because he's terribly important, and we'll get the first slide properly up, and I will lose us. Are you ready, Dave?
As I'll ever be, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Good evening, folks. This is, as you've gathered, a slightly strange way of doing it. This is the first one we've ever done from a script. That's the first key. And the second is, obviously, we don't have that many photos from 150 years ago. So there's quite a bit of talk at the front end of it, but we think it's worth it. So basically, a document surfaced recently, which has helped us to understand more of the process of building the railway. And that is the contract between the railway company and Ambrose Oliver, the contractor. We've transcribed it, and the transcription runs to 26 pages. So I'll only be doing very edited highlights. The specification is incredibly comprehensive and detailed and covers all aspects of the building of the railway. The contract confirms the amount to be paid as £21,000. Then the first shock that we got was there's a time penalty clause, which says if the contractor shall fail the due performance of his contract, he should be liable to pay the company the sum of £200 for each and every week, which may elapse between the appointed and actual time of completion. And that was something that quite surprised us. It also says that the contractor would be paid on a monthly basis, and he'd be paid 90% the value of the work done and certificated by the company's engineer. From that payment, the contractor then had to repay to the company 1/3 of that monthly payment towards the purchase of 500 £10 shares in the railway until that sum was paid in full. So it means that they weren't ever going to give him cash. Well, part cash. Then we found the first deadline, and the first deadline is also intriguing. The contractor shall complete and deliver up to the company that portion of the railway running from Ravenglass to a distance of 4 miles and 11 chains. And 4 miles and 11 chains is Eskdale Green, basically. But then the next phrase is fit for passengers and mineral traffic within 9 months after being handed over the land required. So there was certainly an intention from the start to be looking at passenger hauling. And the engineer was actually handed over fairly sweeping powers of control over the build. And his decisions, directions, certificates, awards were binding on both the contractor and the company. All of the aspects of the work had to be inspected and signed off by the engineer, including excavations before they filled them in again, foundations, brickwork, stonework, as it progressed. Go, Stuart. Yes, oh, it works. The sidings and crossings were specified at that time, and this is 1874, as being located two sets of points and crossings with levers and sidings on the high level at Ravenglass, two sets of points and crossings with levers and sidings on the low level at Ravenglass, two sets of points and crossings at or near the road adjoining the King of Prussia Inn, 4 miles and 11 chains, and then two sets of points and crossings and sidings at or near the termination of the line. Now that effectively stops me asking the questions about whether the loop on the high level was ever built. It obviously was, so I'll stop asking that. There's no mention of the engine shed and the Earton Road station. The engine shed, although these are much later pictures, doesn't appear to have changed very much. The roofs were slated, stone built, fairly big, substantial doors until one of the scooters bashed one in. The Earton Road station building itself wouldn't be needed immediately, although there was obviously plans for it. So that may not have actually appeared for a year or two. But the bridges and the embankments up to the bridges, all of these were taken as part of the build of the railway. Then, that's it, thank you. We just thought we'd have a little bit of a closer look at the specification for the fencing and ditches. The ditches, the average ditch should be 3 feet wide at the top, 1 foot wide at the bottom, and 2 foot deep to intercept any open drains that may be crossed by the railway. Then for fencing, and you can see it illustrated beautifully here, the posts are to be of larch and 6 inches long in ordinary ground, 7 feet long in soft ground, and of a scantling equal to 5 inches by 3.5 inches at the smallest end. They're to be placed at distance 9 feet from centre to centre and to stand 4 foot 6 inches above the ground. Each post is to have 4 clear mortices cut completely through it to receive the ends of the rails. The horizontal rails, 4 in number, between each pair of posts, are to be straight and good larch, 3.5 inches by 1.5, 10 feet in length, and the ends neatly scarfed so as to fill the mortices of the posts. Then there are other little bits and pieces which we don't need to go into, but we did some quick calculations, and we guesstimate that that would require 8,200 posts to cover the length of the railway, at least. and each of those posts would have to have 4 mortises cut into it, so drilled and then cut out with chisels. As to the rails, we reckon about 32,000 rails would be required to do all of that. So the permanent weight specification is relatively short. I've just popped that one in because it shows that the bridge at Eskdale Green is a very similar design to the Earton Road one. So that seems to be part of the standard. It includes sleepers 5 feet long by 9 inches by 4 inches. We reckon approximately 25,000 of them, and £40 to the yard rails. Then, although there are details of cuttings, we can't actually think, apart from sort of blasting out Rock Point to get round Rock Point, we can't think of any other major cuttings, but they were specified. The embankments, obviously, very difficult to see after 150 years, but the previous one was just before the quarry, and this is the Cattle Creep Bridge just before the cutting, and the wall that comes towards you it looks quite good now, but we have to bear in mind that in 1876 it was remade by Mr. Quan and his gang after the infamous quote of masonry of indifferent finish. Oh yeah, that's more of it heading back towards the bridge. So the railway opened around 1875 as a mineral line, and the next year they went for passenger traffic. Colonel Yolland inspected the line, gave his report to the Board of Trade on 27th of June 1876, and he concluded that by reason of the incompleteness of the work and the insufficiency of the establishment, opening the line for passenger traffic cannot be sanctioned without danger to the public using the same. Now, in the past, there's been a suggestion that it was the contractor whose work was not up to scratch. Now that we've seen the specification and the fact that the engineer had to sign it off every month, you could perhaps be asking the question that, was Mr. Page really across everything that was happening? Was it good enough? So either he was lax in his monitoring or not qualified to make judgment, or was he getting a little money set aside from the contractor? We don't know. One of the things that really exercised Colonel Yolland was the embankment around Rock Point, and we haven't got any particularly clear shots looking all the way down, but bear in mind there's a 60-foot drop from the railway down to the river, which is just out of screen. And it may look a bit precarious now, but according to Mr. Quan, the long and high embankment around Walkmill Point has been widened about 20 feet at the base and about 6 feet at the top, brought up to a proper slope with soil and finished off with a coating of sods. So if you imagine taking 6 feet off the top and 20 feet off the bottom of that slope, it would be even more dramatic, I would think, in there. At Beckfoot, this is obviously a later image. The goods station would have been built first. That's the one on the left, sort of blocking Stanley Gill House. and the passenger station would have come later. The reason we use this postcard is this. The comment on the back said, "It is a real rat track railway," which sort of helps us convince ourselves that that's where Ratty came from, rather than any involvement from a Mr. Ratcliffe. Right, let me just catch up. Yeah, these are two really good views across the valley, with the cottages down at front centre, and you can see the line going across the valley towards Gilforce. And we're fortunate, thanks to David Mosley, in that he went up and took the view from the other side. So you can actually see it coming past Church Farm and along by the river. And as we've actually got that far, kind of lost my script. Thank you. Because we're at that stage, we thought we'd look. Oh, sorry. The next slide should show the embankment that goes along before it gets to the Valley Road, with quite a famous visitor. We don't know how far the single line extended in 1925, but in 1926 it certainly got as far as the road. And you'll see again, there's a cattle creep set underneath, which is obviously still there. Back on script, as we've set off in that direction, the question is, in our minds, how did these girders get from the main line to that position and then be put into position? Because there must have been a reasonable weight. And you can see, obviously the woodwork above it, these were around about 1904, 1905. So some of it was still left. And that gives some idea of the scale of the girders. And I know in 15-inch gauge, we had some pretty big loads carried, and it would have been a degree easier with 3 foot rather than 15-inch. But we're not quite sure they would have managed to bring these girders up by rail. And the alternative view is that there was a regular run from Drigg mainline station. The horses set off in the morning from Drigg and went up as far as the bottom of Hardknot, which is that, to bring timber down. And the timber would have been carted down fairly soon after it was chopped. So there would still be quite a lot of sap in the timber. And when you see the lengths that they were carrying, it is entirely possible that those carts could actually take a single girder each and actually take them up by road. The fact that it's come through Home Rook means that they were using the road that effectively goes up through to Santon Bridge, which has quite a few hills on it. And although they say they added an extra horse to get up the hills, presumably that horse would then have had to be taken to the back at the top of the hills to stop the thing running away. But we think it's a possible. Then this is just an aside, in that we haven't quite worked out how the system worked. In the contract, there's a paragraph that says the remaining money of such balance shall be paid within 1 calendar month after the engineer shall have certified in writing under his hand that the contractor has upheld and maintained the works in permanent way for 12 months after completion. So that raises the question, did he not get paid for the balance until May 1876? We can't trace that, so we may never know. Another small issue that Mr. Oliver may have had, certainly did have, in February 1876, a certain Spencer Whately, a coal factor from Paddington, issued a writ against Mr. Oliver, claiming that Mr. Oliver had asked him to introduce him to the secretary of the R&ER and use his influence to get a contract for a commission of 2.5%. So his claim on the writ was for £800. Oliver apparently admitted the agreement, but found that the plaintiff was not actually acquainted with the secretary and board of the railway, and that Oliver obtained the contract by his own exertions. Payment was also only partly in cash, as we've seen. More than half was in shares in the company, which he'd been unable to sell or dispose of. So Oliver had made two £50 payments, which he stated was enough for the information just to be given the name of the R&ER. The writ was withdrawn the following year. We don't know the conclusion. Right, so now we move forward to the 15-inch. And throw the script away again. So as is well known, the main expedient of converting the line to 15-inch was simply picking the rails up and moving them to the sounder centres of the sleepers. In this shot, we can identify one or two people who keep cropping up. We can be certain of the name of the guy third from the right, who's Jack Lister, and we think the guy third from the left is Jack Parker, who had a connection with Hollostones at Earton Road, which is why Black Bridge was in the early days actually described as Parker's Ramp. And he was one of the grandfathers to Stan Wilson at Manchester Mill. So the next major event was actually trying to drop the level of the railway as it went up through Mill Wood, because as you're going through the wood, obviously it's dark and it's dank and prone to slipping. So they decided to drop it, we think, by about a metre. So this is taking the levels, and it started from the bridge over the Leat to Manchester Mill, which is that one. Again, early use of concrete. And you can see from this one, with the bridge just visible on the left there, the original line on the right, and the new line in between the two. So it's starting to drop. Yeah, on this shot, they've obviously dug quite a bit out, and they're laying a bed of chippings. And interestingly, they're using River Esk as a stone train, or to pull a stone train, but obviously not necessarily to time, as they were still having some problems with it sticking. Again, we have Mr. Parker on the left there, Jack Lister holding on to the wagon, and Mr. Gillen was also around and keeping an eye on things. He's just behind Jack at that point. So again, you can see how it's progressing, how much difference there is, which in strict case, it doesn't appear to be much, but over 3/4 of a mile, could make a difference trying to slog up the bank. Now, according to Tom Jones, who was there obviously at the time, he says they waited for the first train to go up the valley, then they unbolted the track panels and lifted them across and rebolted them, and 2 hours later they were ready for the train to come back down. And obviously it would have gone slowly over it, but it train got back down. And then within a day or two, it seemed to be in full use, because we have 3 photos taken at the same place. I will keep on plodding through these if we could, Stuart. That's the top of the bank. The guy standing on the old level, and that's the new as completed. So yeah, here we have 3 in a row. We have Saint-Péray going up, and the reason we're relatively confident these were at the same time is if you have a look on the left, you'll see a shovel lying there, with River-esque following with a much bigger train. And they dragged in, they must have had a lot of people, they dragged in ICL1, and you can see them all being covered with exhaust fumes, which must be even worse than steam. And quite a good indicator of the time is that ICL1's left hand from the cab headlight is out. That gives us another clue for timing. So then, as work began at the quarry, end of 22 into 23, there was a lot of overburden to be taken out, so soil and perished rock before they could get to the rock that they needed. So it was all brought down and used to build the high-level embankment until it was taking too much rock. So they ended it up with columns. And we've said this before, the amount of concrete that was used in the various iterations of the plant is boggling, because it was all mixed by hand. And you can see at the front of that particular shot, those are the columns that actually supported the shaft that drove everything from the engine at the far end. But you can see there are quite substantial columns. And we've said it before, there was one that was about 7 foot square by 8 foot high to carry one of the crushers. And that's a lot of concrete to mix by hand. Right, where did we go next? Yeah, the only other little bit of civil engineering, I suppose you'd call it, was making piles and columns to support the new Dalegarth Cafe. So this would be 1927, because they've got round to building the toilets. And the actual space that was originally taken up by the 3 foot line has now been converted to 3 tracks from about 1927 through to about 1931, before the various doors on the saloons fouled each other and got broken off. So they cut it down to 2 lines, 2 tracks. Oh yes, there's the 3 tracks, taking it all up. Again, that's ICL1, but it's the second version. And we've been desperately trying to look at the chairs out on the veranda, because someone has suggested that some of the chairs used at Dalegarth were actually from RMS Mauritania through Sir Aubrey's Cunard connection. But that's going off piste. So now we get through to Gilbert's Cutting, and because nearly all of the cutting shots were taken on the same day, we'll probably go through them a little bit faster. Basically, on the plan of the line, there was a double reverse curve at Hollinghead. And for those of a certain age who travelled on the line in the 50s and into the early 60s, you always knew where you were, even with your eyes closed, because the actual coach wheels would scream and screech as they went round those two bends. And because they were always facing in the same direction, the wear would be uneven on the wheels. And it was just thought to be putting a lot of strain on it. We don't know, and if anyone out there could tell me, I'd be grateful, whether when they lifted the coaches off for winter maintenance, whether there was any way of turning bogies round. We couldn't see one, so we assumed that they were always in that same line. So in the 60s, Colin Gilbert, who'd already put quite a bit of money in, decided that he would do something spectacular. And go on to the next one, please, Stuart. You can see at the top of the map there, Hollinghead Bend, as it's put. And it's quite a sharp kink. And if we look at the after shot, it doesn't appear to be a dramatic difference. And certainly compared to some of the Welsh lines, you couldn't call it a major deviation. I think a minor deviation is all we could claim. But it did make a significant difference. And this is the Hollinghead Bends looking back down the line in 3-foot days. This presumably is a little earlier than this one, which is looking back up the line. And they must have been cautious about it because they put a guardrail on the inside to try and catch any coaches that came off. And this is the end point, if you like, of Gilbert's Cutting, where it would rejoin the original alignment. So, oh, sorry, yes. Have a look below the what will be the cutting. Towards the back on the last two coaches, you can just about see the Cattle Creep bridge that goes under it. And the alignment of that will be shown up later. This was quite a favourite place for a shot because Mary liked it, certainly. So you've got Sir Aubrey and then River Esk, still fairly early days, and then Colossus, complete with the pram, and Miss Hill patiently sitting by the line side, waiting for all these trains to go past. So Patrick Sato, oh, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, we're showing the line. So the bridge is in the foreground and we're looking across and up the valley. And there's a couple more shots that actually show how much of a twist and turn it was. And another one, yeah. So it really was, you know, in terms of our railway, it was significant. Oh, and then we have a few shots. This is actually going over that Cattle Creek Bridge and heading up the valley. And we have a few of these, so we'll scoot through them fairly quickly. It's around that second bend. And again, these are from the 1950 Castley negs, which we acquired. And to prove that it had been a problem for quite a while, we jumped back to 1925 with Howey on the left and Terence on the right, Holder on the right. Then I think we go into, oh no, we've got to go back down the valley again. So a couple of these. This is back with Castley again and back over the bridge. So just sort of emphasizing how tight they were. The chairman of the Preservation Society at the time was Patrick Sato, who was a chartered surveyor, and he undertook to survey the potential cutting. And next, please, Stuart. So did all the plans and drawings and calculations, and he actually made the application for planning permission on behalf of the railway, which they actually achieved 21st of September 63. And then once we got permission to do it, Colin Gilbert took over with his money, and he paid for the blasting and the clearing and the bulldozing to bring it down to level. Now, these shots were all taken by Douglas on the same day, so they're not over dramatic, so we can scoot through those. Possibly another one, yeah. And then once the level was actually established at the bottom of the cutting, it was the permanent staff who came as the track gang and laid the rails through. And then they were followed by lads from the Ullswater outward bound school at Ullswater. And basically they were just cleaning the debris and tidying everything up. Now, this is quite a good shot because it shows the original alignment of that Cattle Creek Bridge, and the original line went off to the right, just about where the person we think is Douglas is standing. Then at a later stage, the quarry, the granite that had been taken out from the excavations was actually used by Dick Nick and Cyril to rebuild the bridge, and you can see it now in its new alignment. And if I can find that. So this is the official opening train. This is 27th of March 1964. And it's pulling up slowly, driven by Colin Gilbert. And you can see in the distance there's a little tape. Once they'd pulled up there, then first Mr. Gilbert gave his chat about how things had gone. And then Patrick Sato had a word, and you can see the gentleman in the very light flat cap who's in the cab with Colin Gilbert is actually Tommy Postlethwaite, who owned Spout House and actually agreed to swap the new line and take up the line that the old line went on. So Mr. Sato duly cut the tape, and somebody actually caught it fluttering, which is quite a nice shot. And then he jumped back onto the engine and they set off. Yeah, we can go ahead. And they set off, and you can see it's a bit sort of red and raw. And you wouldn't think that that was 20,000 tons of soil and granite and stuff, but it does soon mount up. So then it carried on up to Delgarth, where we assume they had some sort of celebration at the cafe. I think it pulls forward again, yeah. And you can see it was quite a good move to use River Road, because you can actually get 3 adults sitting astride. And this is actually the same train, but on the return trip and coming back down the valley. Then, again, although it's not massive, it does make a feature in the line. And Douglas was very quick. When we got some new saloons, he decided that he would get Glyn to go backwards and forwards so he could take it from various different angles and feature the bridge. And I think there were a couple of the cutting as well. Then when 71, when Northern Chief came up for his tests, Doug thought he'd obviously found a good location. So he went back up there and got Graham and Terry to sort of go past, then back up, then go past again. And we skip quickly through these because these are a repeat, but if I'd still had the pictures, I would have edited, but I had to send the pictures on to Stuart early. So you can see from this shot that the gorse has come back up a bit and it's starting to mature. And although it's not necessarily something we encourage visitors to do, people who have a legitimate place on the railway, it does make quite a good backdrop now as it's matured. It's obviously still in the early days, and Controller Grum is still driving at this point, but already nature started to come back and it's beginning to mature. So we thought we'd have a little gallery of visitors as well as ours. So, trying to think what's next. Oh yes, this one I think was described as Thunder in the Fells, BVR number 8. And then you can see, although some of the granite's still exposed, it is definitely maturing, looking a bit more of a backdrop, shall we say. Spirit of Adventure, so this would be 2000 at a guess for the 125th. And
1994, I think, Dave.
Oh, yes.
River Oat, maybe.
Yes. Because something else was here with, I didn't think it was Sian. I really ought to put the dates on these. Anyway, it's a nice backdrop, and you can, and back to BVR, this was actually called Beaver, wasn't it? The diesel?
Yeah, that was the one from Windmill Farm, and I think it's at Bressingham now.
Oh, right.
And that was Ratty 125.
Oh, I got one of them right.
You're just putting them into testers, really, aren't you?
No, I'm just busking it as usual. Yeah, so, and we thought we'd feature our own locos as well. It's quite atmospheric. River Mite with the golden anniversary headboard, and obviously once nature does start to creep back in, then it has to be kept under control, partly for fire risk and partly for tidiness. And we do have some assistance, as well as number 1 volunteer. and we have a specialist overseer who's checking to see whether we've got it right. And then there's a nice little gallery looking up the valley, because with the direction going up to Hartefell, it does make quite a good backdrop. So you find that was that's Esk. Then night. Look at all those open coaches. Oh, more coaches. So that's rock. And even, again, we're not actually encouraging people to go into the cutting to take the photos, but if you're safe, then it does make a quite spectacular backdrop. And that's one of my favorites. Possibly nowadays the color would be turned up a bit, but it just makes a nice shot with a nice engine. And one of ours again, and it actually changes atmosphere with the weather, so it still looks quite good even in the snow. And it also brought out an experiment on the insulating properties of cardboard, and I'm assured that it was quite successful. So just to recap, if we go to Esk, that's it as it was. And the only shot I've been able to find that matches that, roughly, is Les on its epic trip up and down the valley. And again, that's quite good, because you can see where the old line went off to the right, just about where the sign is. And then to finish with a beautiful mixture of sun and snow and steam. And I hope you'll excuse me if I've raced through that a bit, but there was quite a lot of information. I seem to have run out.
Very good, Dave. We'll have a look and see what people have
Oh,
commented.
yes.
So let's see. So the Glencoe Folk Museum has put something HS2, just getting the obvious joke out of the way early. So we'll leave that one for now. It's still too soon. And Christopher has put that the wall below the cattle creep was partly rebuilt again by Polish Pete about 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, that's worth knowing. I shall add that to my notes.
And then Nigel's put, he can believe it was 20,000 tonnes. He's just dug out a 4 metre by 2 metre area for his polytunnel, and that was 3 tonnes.
Right. That's nothing to do with the railway then, Nigel.
And our Oracle of Dates, Christopher, has said that Sian was 1994 as well.
Oh, right.
I
mean, it's embarrassing because I do actually have the information to hand when I'm assembling these, but I just keep forgetting to write it in the comments section.
And Sam Dixon has asked, how long did the construction of Gilberts Cutting take, and was the line severed through the construction?
Oh, yes, very much severed. It was through the winter, so I think, I can't remember seeing a reference in the magazine to them starting, but I've got a feeling it was just into the new year of 1964. There were some preparations done in 63, but I think, let me just go back. Okay, just bear with me. Yeah, we could maybe go back to the planning permission.
I can go back to the planning permission. Just bear with me.
Because it would have started at some time after that. Did you?
You don't need a time load when you've got a back key.
There we are. So September 63 was the planning application, and that was when it was, that was the date of the application, not the date of the permission. I've got something in the way. Just get rid of that. No, it doesn't give a date at the bottom. No, it's just got a reference. So we'll have to say sometime.
Planning worked in those days, doesn't it?
Yeah, but they couldn't possibly have put contractors on site before that date.
No.
So it does take us well into the winter of 63 into 64.
And there are a few more comments come in.
Yes, I've got Trevor's.
David has mentioned that if Captain Howey had built the extension to Ambleside, it would have included tunnels and perhaps spirals. a lot of money. Mike has mentioned that when the Preservation Society took over the Riverside and Great Northern Railway, Norman Sandley had about a foot scraped off the top of the grade out near the west end of the line, so the 440s could pull up the hill.
Right, so even a foot makes a difference.
And then Trevor has never heard of bogies being turned. Rail from 1964 cutting to the walls at Dalegarth 1977-ish. And then Dalegarth siding in the mid-90s. You need to check dates. Trevor could make sense of that gibberish for us if he understands.
Yes. I would probably have some of those dates.
Yes. And I think that is it. So I will stop the share there. So thank you very much, Dave, and thank you for doing that while you're preparing for to become slightly bionic next week. Trevor says his Wi-Fi is a bit iffy and the rail was moved on those dates.
All right.
So as we all do, we wish Dave all the best for his operation next week. No doubt he'll have plenty of archive material in the hospital with him. And we will look forward to seeing you all soon. But thank you very much for watching, and see you before Christmas, no doubt. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.